Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Three Marlets Movie Review Podcast. Is that what I'm calling this show this week? It'll be changed next week, don't worry. I really need to get into a better formula for this. But this week's podcast-ish like show, we're reviewing this week Huntsman, The Winter's War. And I really don't want to get into a plot by plot or plot point by plot point review. I just want to give some of my general impressions. This is actually my second recording attempt. I had some problems on the first recording attempt, so if my voice sounds a little strange, it's because I tried to do a 45-minute review on that and then had some issues. So I'm going to make this one a lot shorter. Don't worry. Before I get into any details, if you're just here for a quick general summary, this is not a good movie. There's a lot of problems in that it's a really, really bad sequel. In that it's obviously Huntsman Winter's War is a sequel to Snow White and the Huntsman that came out about 3 years ago. I did a review of that. I haven't rewatched my review, and I haven't seen the movie since I saw it in theaters 3 years ago. I don't remember everything about it, but I will get into some of the big things that were annoying me. But there's an element where there's some things you have to watch the first movie to get in this film. But because you have to watch that first movie, you're also then seeing all of the stuff they seem to be ignoring outright from the first movie. And that's including the Miss not appearing in this movie, Snow White. Which is probably the biggest one to name. So, backing up a little bit before I get back into that, my impression is that it's not a very good film. It's mediocre, which I think is what I said with the first one, that it was kind of like it wasn't a fantastic movie. It wasn't bad, but it was just like an okay fantasy film. And I think I said the weakest part of that film was Kristen Stewart, who is, of course, not appearing in this film. But this one is probably more confusing, and I think this one went through a lot of rewrites over at some point they went, oh, Elsa's popular, so let's have it an Ice Queen. This one, there are a few things that I like, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But overall, it's not one I'm going to recommend. If you're really into fantasy films, this is worth checking out. And it's kind of worth checking out to see how people can mess up, seeing obvious points from a previous film that should have been addressed in the sequel but aren't. It's a good film to watch for that. I was at least looking forward to seeing Charlize Theron show up and do it more, because she really stole the first film. Her character was probably the best part of the first film. This is a minor spoiler, but you really should know this going in. She's only really in near the end of the film, like the last act of the film she's in. So if that's really why you're going to see this, be prepared for that. However, once you're within the movie for a little while, you start to realize that anyway. So there's that. So disappointed by this one. But at the same time, I'm not disappointed enough to be angry or even to go, "Oh my God, this is such a horrible film." It's very, It's not even 47 Ronin bad, where it's enjoyable how bad it is and batshit it is. There's some batshit stuff in here, don't get me wrong, but the movie just kind of drags. Like I said, I'll hit the biggest one on the stone. How they decided not to cast Kristen Stewart, which is hilarious, because the first film was really a Kristen Stewart vehicle. They were really this was all it could be about. Her, she's the new Snow White. She's the new icon, and funny thing is because I think pretty much everyone said the same thing about the first movie. Is before you had the line, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And it's Charlize Theron saying this, and the mirror is saying, "Oh, Snow White is prettier." And then you look at the two characters, and you're like, no, the fairer one, i.e., medieval for the hotter one, is Charlize Theron's character. And they make it quite clear that they are talking about, don't give me some, well, medieval fair is supposed to mean, is this, and there's other, actually, no, the movie makes it quite clear in the first film that they are talking about looks. And you just look at that and you're like, no, Charlize Theron, very clearly much more beautiful, much more desirable, and I'm sure there's a few people out there that wanted, would go rather with Miss Stewart, and that's fine for them. But I am fairly confident the aggregate of the population is with me. Now, if we aggregate that up, it's pretty heavily in favor of Miss Theron. I don't know why I'm pronouncing her name that way. So, the other thing in that movie is her character, the Ravana character, they really did something interesting with her. Now, there was, of course, the Angelina Jolie Maleficent film, which I didn't get around to seeing that one. And I know it's supposed to look at the Snow White story from her perspective, but they really did a good job in this one of making the Ravana character thoroughly evil, but yet understandably how she came about to that evilness. And she had time to do that, and she had time to do over the top. Here you can kind of tell she was kind of rushed in, and it was really more of, people were so enthralled with Charlize Theron's performance in the last one, and now she's, really popular after Fury Road. We really need her in here. And who cares what the script was? Force that character in now to this script, and that's what it feels like they did. Because they make Charlize Theron's character and the new Winter, Ice, the not Elsa, are sisters. Going back though on the Kristen Stewart thing, the other thing they do make this as a post Snow White and the Huntsman movie. The advertisements are kind of weird because a lot of people are under the impression from the advertisements that this is a prequel, and it's not. There is a prologue in the movie that's about, 15 minutes long, maybe 20 minutes. That does take place, 7 years prior, takes place before the first movie, but it's really like a prologue. It really just sets that up, and then the rest of the movie picks up after the events of the first film. Because the other thing people were saying is, so the previews give the impression this is a prequel. If you read or heard or saw any of the interviews that they were giving about this film, they said it was more like split, and it's really not split down the middle, as they gave the impression. It really is just that's prologue that basically sets up the origin of the characters. So, first lie right there. With Snow White now being queen, they mention her by name a lot. They call her Snow White a lot. I don't think they ever called her Snow White so much in the first film. You figure they would call her the queen more often, but I guess they were afraid that you would get that confused with the other two queens in the movie. But there's like one shot of, I guess it's supposed to be Snow White kind of all distraught looking at the mirror. And which is why apparently she orders this mirror to be sent away, as opposed to melted down and destroyed. But she's not there. Like the Prince Charming-ish character shows up real quick to kind of, basically went to kind of get the plot moving. But even then, there's like the Chris Hemsworth essentially just throws all them off too. That's the only, not throws off, but basically says, "Ugh." the Winter Queen is coming. The Winter Queen is coming. Like everyone, by the way, everyone in this movie speaks with a really bad Irish accent, which is made all the more hilarious when you have Liam Neeson doing the voiceover opening and closing with his actual Irish accent that does not sound like the fake Irish accent that everyone else is doing. Because you have Jessica Chastain and doing her really bad fake Irish accent, and Chris Hemsworth doing his bad fake Irish accent that he only half does. I guess he realized that they weren't picking up, that the directors weren't picking up when he was slipping back into his native Australian. So, like, half of his performance is in his native Australian accent, and the other half is in the fake Irish accent. At some point during this production, Hemsworth realized that the directors could not tell the difference between the two accents, and it's kind of hilarious. That's probably the best. I hate to say it, but the bad accents are the best part of this movie. And they're not that funny, unfortunately. Ooh, okay, almost accidentally paused recording there for a second. So yeah, Kristen Stewart's not in there, and in fact, they actually make it worse by kind of putting so many mentions to her. Like, they don't name the kingdom, it's Snow White's kingdom, and they always say it's Snow White kingdoms, and our armies are so vast that Freya cannot easily invade Snow White's kingdom. And it just reminds you that she's not in the film, and you're kind of grateful that she's not in the film because she did have the worst performance in the first one. You didn't buy her charisma as much. She was still really in Twilight mode. I understand maybe Kristen Stewart can... I haven't seen her too much else. I'm willing to believe she can be a better actress than what is in those films. I just haven't seen it, and at the very least, if she is capable, she was still in Twilight mode when she made the first movie. But when they keep on referring to Snow White, you're just kind of reminded how she's not in there. Chris Hemsworth does his usual Chris Hemsworth performance. He's charming. I don't know. There's not much else to say. He's playing the Huntsman. It's a decent enough character. It's nothing amazing to write home about, but it suffices, and that's kind of what worked in the first movie. Charlize Theron, again, she shows up, but she's not as over the top, and I think that has to do with this kind of relationship with the Freya character. Like I said, she doesn't really have as much to work with in this one. She doesn't have any character buildings. She's kind of brought back to life. She's now like her character's like supposed to be in between death and alive because her soul has now gone into the mirror, so she's not truly alive, but she's not truly dead. So, which also explains why she's not as powerful. But she only shows up near the end in just enough time to kind of show up to her sister and going, "We're going to invade and take back my kingdom." And that's kind of it. And then later on, she's kind of, and then kind of showing she's really usurping her sister's power type deal. The Sarah character's in there, which is Jessica Chastain. That's how you pronounce her name. She plays her usual tough girl thing, only with a really bad Irish accent. She doesn't go to, like... Unfortunately, she doesn't pull off, like, the crazy she was in Sabotage. If she did the crazy she was in Sabotage, then this movie might be enjoyable. It'd be at least enjoyably bad. They do some... Emily Blunt does a fine enough job. Her character, she's unfortunately in a bad movie. They at least try to do what they did with Charlize Theron's character. In this one, but at least really, she's like the main. She really is the main villain, except for near the end where she's not the main villain. Nirvana takes over as the main villain, and they kind of try to set this up that she's really just grief-stricken because, and you can guess this at the very beginning of the movie anyway. She's when her sister took over a kingdom, she fell in love with this other noble who was promised to another man, but they had a premarital affair. Freya's character, of course, is pregnant, has a child, and her lover and her are going to run off and raise this baby somewhere. And on the night they're supposed to do this, the lover apparently decides instead to light the child on fire and burn it alive in a crib. And her grief and rage at this moment causes her powers to emerge, and of course she kills her lover there who murdered her child. Which is why Charlize Ravana there then sends off her sister to start taking over the north and making a northern kingdom for her. You guess right at the beginning that, the Ravana character probably manipulated the lover character using her magic to go nuts and kill the baby. So they kind of try to get a little bit of that, but you're kind of stuck at the same time with these two supposed to be being sisters, why there's no mention of the brother. I do remember the brother character from the first film. No mention of him. There's no mention of him. They didn't bring back the actor to show up in the prologue. All they had to do, if he had just showed up in the prologue at some point, I would have not have had an issue. There's also, of course, the problem is this character is never mentioned. There's no indication that she exists in the first film, and yet she's supposed to be like super close with her sister. Yet her sister was super close with her brother, to the point where they almost seemed like they were going to go Lannister on each other. You know what I mean. It's weird that they don't mention that. Like, they don't... Maybe, they could have done something where they could have showed maybe the brother was like the one character that was like balancing these two. I don't know if that was just the actor or it never occurred to them to try to address the fact that there was the brother. They just want to ignore that he ever existed. So you're kind of just left like... If you remember the first... This is what I said, there's some stuff in here where if you watch the first movie, you at least get some idea of how bad the Charlize Theron character is. At the same time, you're then left wondering, wait a minute, why is no one bringing up the lack of the brother and the fact the brother's dead? You figure those two, that would be like a serious, more than anything else, that would be the serious issue between them. No, they don't. Also, because they're doing this kind of weird, sympathetic look with this character, they were trying to show she's not completely evil and that she was manipulated by Ravana. They don't let her do a true over-the-top performance like Charlize Theron was doing in the first film. She really was chewing the scenery, as they say, in that one. Here, Emily Blunt isn't given as much freedom because the character, you can't do that type of over-the-top performance. I mean, she's going kind of crazy, but as much as she's trying to stay this sympathetic, she just hates love. Love is a lie. That's all her character, which, by the way, is going to lead to some... She's apparently banning people from falling in love in her kingdom. It's going to lead to some problems later on with the demographic issue. Just going to say your plans to take over the world probably going to run into a problem when you have no children in your kingdom and everyone's an old person. You're going to have, it's got this image of this army coming out with walkers. Hey, we're going to take it, damn kids, get off our lawns. Yeah. So there's that. Nick Frost is in there as the dwarf. He's the only returning dwarf character. He's really the only other returning character, because he is in throughout most of the movie. Joined by another dwarf, and then some women dwarf, and then at the end, of course, there's two male dwarfs and two women dwarfs, and they do this whole thing where male dwarfs aren't supposed to really like women dwarfs. Only Nick Frost's character and another dwarf like immediately start having this like oh so romantic yet simple relationship. I'm trying to think. I did mention a lot of the stuff I didn't like. I'll at least mention the one thing I did like is they do set this up that in the prologue, like of course with I mentioned the whole love is banned in the northern Queen's Kingdom. Of course, the huntsman and the huntswoman here fall in love. They decide to run away. They get caught, and during this action scene, it gets stopped when the Ice Queen throws up this wall, and the wall of ice, the both characters she projects onto there something that she believes will destroy their love. So Jessica Chastain's character sees Chris Hemsworth, the better Hemsworth. Uh, Once the wall's up, she just sees him run away when in reality he's not. He's trying to get through the wall to her. Meanwhile, Chris Hemsworth character sees Jessica Chastain's character stabbed to death by the other huntsman. Then he's knocked out and thrown into a river. So they do set this up, and then later on they come back when Jessica Chastain's character comes back. She kind of says she kind of really hates him because he ran away. And he tries to explain it's a lie. They eventually get into this scene with goblins, though, that he basically with almost without hesitation, the Chastain's character falls down. He runs over this little rickety bridge, saves her, gets her across this bridge, realizes that these goblins are going to continue to chase them, so this cuts this rope bridge down and stays on. Basically, is just willing to sacrifice his life immediately, and they don't flash back to that scene. They don't have her like monologue that oh no, it was a lie. It was he really did care for me. No, she just has an expression on her face where you can see her character is having that thought in her mind. They don't feel the need to do a flashback to let the audience know, oh yes, oh remember that scene earlier that we told you about like 15 minutes ago? No, they trust that the audience remembered all that stuff. And I appreciate that, because then that scene, it works, it flows nicely. You understand what that character is realizing, and you're fine with it, and it works. And then later on, they do the same thing where, afterwards she starts to try to explain something. You don't know the things I've done, and of course it turns out this whole time she was working with the queen, the Ice Queen, Freya. Which, by the way, I think Hollywood only knows one female Norse name, and that name is Freya. Think of it. It's the one they always go with. I understand she was like the most popular female Norse god. There are other Scandinavian names for females, so Hollywood, you can go with them. I digress. And again, they don't do a flashback or anything when that's revealed. There's some nice little characterization, and they have competent actors and actresses that they can kind of pull that off a little bit. So that is at least one positive thing I will give this movie. They didn't feel the need to hold my hand at that point. I can appreciate that. The other thing is they keep on talking about this winter's war. The war that's another lie that trailers told us. There's no war. There's really no major battles. There's a couple of action scenes, but they normally don't involve a lot of people. They're like little, I won't even call them skirmishes. They're like, they run into some trolls, but you really don't see any more than maybe 10 trolls. There's a fight with some huntsmen in a bar. There's really like maybe 5 huntsmen. Not exactly a war. You see even in the prologue, you see the aftermath of a war, like the aftermath of a battlefield, but you really don't see anyone really fighting in it. There's no armies clashing like there was in the first Huntsman movie. I thought there was going to be some sort of battle at some point because the Huntsman tells not Prince Charming, to rally Snow White's armies and get them onto the northern border because the Queen is coming. So I thought at some point we would have this type of battle, and we didn't. Never saw it. It never happened. It never occurred. At some point, I was thinking maybe at the end there would be some sort of cavalry charge or something on the Ice Queen's fortress. No. So really, not much of a war. And then you kind of also, even at the end, you predicted the Freya character and the Ravana character. The Freya character kind of. One, she's like starting to see. She eventually sees that she can't break the love between these two characters, and she's kind of really doubting her own doubts about love, and she's getting disturbed by her sister apparently really not respecting the fact that this is supposed to be her kingdom and is kind of really taking over everything. And you can really easily see, okay, at some point they're going to reveal what we already know about. It was really Ravana that caused the lover to kill the baby. And those two are going to fight. And they do, and they both wind up killing each other, essentially. The movie probably would have been better without the Ravana character. I suspect that was really... that originally in the script... that this was supposed to be a completely unrelated. That the Freya character was probably not supposed to be related to the Ravana character. And I'm sure there was some sort of other... something else that was supposed to... I don't know what it was, what they originally had planned. I'm sure that's not how it was originally supposed to go down. And if that was... it probably would have been better if they did it. I understand that they wanted to bring the Ravana character back because everyone liked Charlize Theron's performance, but if they wanted to do that, they really should have brought her back much earlier because she didn't have enough time to be over the top in this one and do the same performance that she had in the first film. So, if it's my recommendation... if you liked the first one, you might not necessarily like this one. If you are a huge fantasy fan, yeah, go ahead and see it. There's some stuff in there, but it's stuff you've seen 1,000 times. There's nothing super original in here. Their portrayal of goblins are kind of interesting. I didn't really get into that earlier, but there is that whole how they set up what goblins are kind of. It's different. They're not your typical like green goblins. They're actually like black, and they have tar for blood, and like they hoard gold, and they can melt gold and turn into rivers of molten gold somehow. They don't explain that, but apparently that's what they do. And then they kind of have a cool design. That's really all I can say. Other than that, it's very stereotypical, kind of bland. If not, it might suffice if you really need something to do this weekend. I know here up in the Northeast, it's supposed to be a rainy day, which kind of ironic, given unfortunately, the passing of Prince today. I already see Google has already put they are fast with that stuff because he only died a few hours ago, and they already have a purple rain. Google's main page has purple rain on it. But I digress. So again, if it's a time filler, sure, you're not going to... a lot of people won't be pissed off. Some people will be. So my recommendation is not really, most likely a pass. course, April's coming near now to an end, which means the summer movie season's about to begin. Looking forward, especially after the taste of Batman vs Superman. I need to wash that out with some good old-fashioned Marvel movies. So looking forward to that. There's some other stuff coming out this summer that looks rather interesting. Maybe I'll do a summer preview movie video at some point, but for now, I'm about 30 minutes in. I think that's a good time to cut us off. So again, subscribe, like, all that other stuff that people always say at the end of one of these podcasts. Stay tuned for more. Hasta luego.